On a Friday night in August 1974, 15-year-old Brett Lewick heard the distinct rumble of a custom pickup truck engine outside his bedroom window. It was a sound he knew all too well. The truck belonged to his stepfather, Larry Britt, a man his mother had just divorced 2 months earlier, after years of what court records would later describe as an abusive marriage. Brett had no way of knowing that this familiar engine noise would be the last sign of his mother's presence in his life. What followed was a disappearance so complete, an alibi so carefully constructed, and a lie so persistent that it would take nearly a quarter-century advances in genetic science and drops of Brett's own blood to finally break through the wall of deception and bring a measure of justice to Dorothy Britt's family. But before we dive deeper into this haunting case, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel. We bring you deeply researched true crime cases that changed lives and challenged the justice system. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our investigations into cases like Dorothy's, where the truth took decades to surface. This is the story of Dorothy Britt, a case that demonstrates both the limitations of 1970s criminal investigation techniques and the power of persistence combined with modern forensic science. It's a case that lingered in the cold case files for 25 years, sustained by a single false testimony, until new technology and an unwavering determination to seek truth finally cracked open a decades-old secret. Welcome back to our channel, where we examine real cases that shaped criminal justice and remind us why the pursuit of truth matters. Today's case takes us to the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, and spans from 1974 to 2001, a journey through time that illustrates how far forensic science has come and how the wheels of justice, though sometimes slow, can still turn. Dorothy Britt was a woman trying to rebuild her life in the summer of 1974, after enduring what family members and court documents described as years of abuse. She had finally divorced Larry Britt just 2 months before her disappearance. She was a dedicated worker, the kind of person who never missed a day at her job, someone her colleagues and family could depend on. She was also a devoted mother to her 15-year-old son, Brett. Those who knew Dorothy described her as principled, reliable, and determined to create a better life for herself and her son after escaping her troubled marriage. She had her own home in the Denver suburbs, a fresh start, and every reason to look toward the future with hope. Her relationship with Larry had officially ended, but as is often the case with domestic violence situations, the legal end of a marriage does not always mean the end of contact or control. The evening of Friday, August 1974, began like many others in the Britt household. Dorothy was home with her son, Brett. The atmosphere was calm, ordinary, but at around 10 o'clock that night, the telephone rang. Dorothy answered, and though Brett couldn't hear the entire conversation, he noticed an immediate change in his mother's demeanor. After hanging up, Dorothy told Brett she needed to go out, but she didn't explain where or why. Brett, already wary of his former stepfather's influence over his mother, had a strong intuition that the call had come from Larry and that his mother was going to meet him. It wasn't unusual for abusers to maintain contact with their former partners, to use phone calls as a means of control or manipulation even after separation. Brett watched his mother leave, feeling uneasy, but having no way to stop her. Later that night, Brett was awakened by a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the distinctive engine of Larry's custom pickup truck idling outside the house. The truck had a modified engine that produced a unique, unmistakable rumble. Brett recognized it immediately. He believed that Larry had picked up his mother, perhaps convincing her to go out for drinks, something that wouldn't have been unusual given their complicated history. Brett tried to sleep, assuming his mother would return home in a few hours. But morning came, and Dorothy did not come home. This was deeply out of character. Dorothy was someone who kept her commitments, who showed up for work without fail, who maintained her responsibilities with dedication. Brett's worry intensified as the hours passed. At 9:30 on Saturday morning, the phone rang. It was Larry Britt, and his question seemed almost theatrical in its innocence. He asked Brett if Dorothy was home. Brett's response was immediate and accusatory. He demanded to know what Larry had done with his mother. According to Brett's later testimony, Larry denied any knowledge of Dorothy's whereabouts, his voice carrying what Brett perceived as false concern. But Brett knew what he had heard the night before. He knew that distinctive engine sound. He knew his mother had gone to meet Larry. And now she was gone. When Dorothy failed to show up for work and remained missing throughout the weekend, Brett contacted the police. The Denver area law enforcement began an investigation, and their initial inquiries led them to the Front Range Inn, a local bar. Witnesses at the establishment confirmed that Dorothy and Larry had been there together late on Friday night. Multiple patrons and the bartender remembered seeing the couple drinking together until approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. The witnesses described them leaving together, getting into Larry's distinctive custom pickup truck. This was the last confirmed sighting of Dorothy Britt alive. Armed with this information and Brett's testimony about hearing the truck outside their home in the early morning hours, investigators obtained permission to search Larry Britt's vehicle. What they discovered was deeply disturbing. Behind the driver's seat, forensic technicians found a significant quantity of blood. In 1974, DNA analysis was not yet available to law enforcement. The technology that would later revolutionize criminal investigation was still years away from practical application in police work. The forensic laboratory could only determine that the blood was human and that it was consistent with Dorothy's blood type. However, blood typing alone was not specific enough to provide definitive proof. Many people share the same blood type, and while the evidence was certainly incriminating, it was not conclusive beyond a reasonable doubt under the evidentiary standards of the time. Larry Britt was arrested in August 1974 and charged in connection with Dorothy's disappearance. Prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to proceed. They had witnesses placing Dorothy with Larry shortly before she vanished. They had Brett's testimony about the truck's presence outside the house, and they had the blood evidence in Larry's vehicle. But Larry maintained his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with Dorothy's disappearance. Then came the testimony that would change everything and allow Larry to walk free for the next 25 years. Betty Curley took the witness stand. Betty was significant for one key reason: she had married Larry Britt just days before Dorothy's disappearance. As Larry's new wife, Betty testified under oath that Larry had been home with her from 12:30 in the morning onward on the night Dorothy vanished. According to her testimony, Larry had returned home at that time and remained there for the rest of the night. This alibi directly contradicted the witness statements from the Front Range Inn, which placed Larry and Dorothy together until 2 o'clock in the morning. However, the defense argued that the bar witnesses might have been mistaken about the exact time, and Betty's testimony as Larry's wife carried weight in court. Without DNA evidence to definitively prove the blood in the truck was Dorothy's without a body, and now facing an alibi witness who claimed Larry was home at the crucial time, prosecutors faced an insurmountable challenge. The judge, bound by the standards of reasonable doubt, had no choice but to dismiss the charges. Larry Britt walked out of the courtroom a free man. Dorothy's case was classified as a cold case filed away in the archives with hundreds of other unsolved disappearances. Brett was left without answers, without his mother, and without justice. Larry moved on with his life, and as the years passed, it seemed increasingly unlikely that Dorothy's case would ever be resolved. The case might have remained cold forever if not for the determination of one investigator. By 1999, the rookie police officer who had worked on the original Dorothy Britt case in 1974 had risen through the ranks to become a commanding officer. 25 years had passed, but the case had never left her mind. With advances in forensic technology and a new perspective gained from years of experience, she decided to reopen the investigation. Cold cases were increasingly being solved through DNA analysis, and she wondered if the old evidence might finally yield the answers that had eluded investigators for so long. The first step was to locate Betty Curley, now considerably older and in declining health. When investigators interviewed her in 1999, they approached the conversation differently than they had 25 years earlier. They emphasized the importance of truth, the passage of time, and the impact of her testimony on a family that had never known what happened to their loved one. Under this renewed questioning, Betty's resolve crumbled. She admitted that her 1974 testimony had been a lie. She confessed that on the night of Dorothy's disappearance, Larry had not come home at 12:30, as she had claimed under oath. Instead, he had been out until the early hours of the morning and had returned home heavily intoxicated. Betty's false testimony, given to protect her new husband, had provided Larry with the alibi that freed him from prosecution. Her admission meant that Larry no longer had an alibi for the crucial hours when Dorothy disappeared. But Betty's recantation alone was not enough to bring new charges. Prosecutors still needed physical evidence linking Larry to Dorothy's death. This is where advances in forensic science became crucial. Investigators retrieved the blood samples that had been collected from Larry's truck in 1974 and preserved as evidence. For 25 years, these dried blood samples had been stored, waiting for technology to catch up with the questions they might answer. By 1999, that technology existed in the form of mitochondrial DNA analysis. Mitochondrial DNA, or DNA, differs from nuclear DNA in several important ways. While nuclear DNA is inherited from both parents, mitochondrial DNA is passed down exclusively through the maternal line from mother to child. This made it uniquely suited for the Dorothy Britt case. Dorothy herself had disappeared without a trace, so investigators had no direct sample of her DNA for comparison. However, Brett Lewick, Dorothy's son, carried her mitochondrial DNA in his cells. If the blood in Larry's truck was Dorothy's, it would match Brett's mitochondrial DNA profile. Brett, who had spent 25 years without knowing what happened to his mother, immediately volunteered to provide a blood sample. The forensic analysis took time, but when the results came back, they were definitive. The mitochondrial DNA from the blood found in Larry Britt's truck was a match to Brett's DNA. The probability of this match occurring by random chance was infinitesimally small. This was scientific proof that Dorothy had been in that truck, and that she had bled there, likely suffering severe injuries. Combined with the recantation of the alibi witness and the circumstantial evidence from 1974, prosecutors finally had enough to bring charges against Larry Britt. In late 1999, 25 years after Dorothy's disappearance, Larry Britt was arrested again. He was 59 years old by then, having lived more than 2 decades as a free man, while Dorothy's family lived with unanswered questions. The arrest made headlines highlighting both the cold case nature of the investigation and the role of DNA technology in finally bringing charges. Larry now faced the reality that the secret he had kept for a quarter century was finally exposed. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors and defense attorneys engaged in negotiations. The reality was that even with the DNA evidence and the recanted alibi, building a murder case without a body is always challenging. Prosecutors wanted a conviction, but they also wanted to give Dorothy's family the closure of knowing what had happened to her. A plea agreement was proposed. If Larry would take a polygraph examination and provide truthful information about what happened to Dorothy, including the location of her remains, the charge would be reduced from murder to manslaughter. Larry agreed to the deal. Under controlled conditions, he underwent polygraph testing while providing his account of events. According to his statement on the night of Dorothy's disappearance, the two of them had indeed gone to the Front Range Inn for drinks, just as witnesses had testified. They left together in his truck in the early morning hours. But their night did not end peacefully. According to Larry's confession, an argument erupted between them while they were in the truck. In a moment that he described as rage, Larry pulled out a firearm and shot Dorothy, killing her. The confession continued with Larry's description of what he did after the killing. He drove to the Chatfield Dam construction site, an area that was being developed as a large reservoir project near Denver. Using the cover of darkness and the construction equipment present at the site, Larry buried Dorothy's body in an area that would soon be flooded as part of the dam project. When Chatfield Reservoir filled, Dorothy's remains were submerged under countless gallons of water, making recovery impossible without draining the entire reservoir. A task that was neither practical nor feasible. In January 2001, Larry Britt entered his guilty plea to manslaughter in a Colorado courtroom. The judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. Many observers, including Dorothy's family members, felt the sentence was too lenient, given that Larry had taken a life and hidden his crime for 25 years. However, the family had made the difficult decision to accept the plea agreement because it gave them something they had been denied for more than 2 decades: the truth. They now knew what had happened to Dorothy. They knew she had not abandoned them by choice. They knew she had not run away to start a new life somewhere else, a possibility that had tormented them during all those years of uncertainty. They knew she had been murdered, and they knew by whom. While Dorothy's physical remains would likely never be recovered from the depths of Chatfield Reservoir, the truth itself provided a form of closure. The case of Dorothy Britt serves as a powerful reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail. It took 25 years' technological advancement and the unwavering determination of a son who refused to forget his mother for the truth to finally emerge. The shadows of the past, no matter how carefully hidden, can be illuminated by the light of science and the persistence of those who refuse to accept that some crimes will remain forever unsolved. Larry Britt spent 25 years believing he had committed the perfect crime, protected by a lie told in a courtroom. But lies, no matter how convincing at the time, cannot stand forever against truth evidence and the evolution of forensic science. This case also highlights the devastating impact of domestic violence, which often does not end with separation or divorce. Dorothy had taken the brave step of leaving an abusive relationship, yet she still lost her life, likely because her abuser could not accept her independence. Her story reminds us why supporting survivors of domestic violence and holding abusers accountable are critical issues that affect entire communities. What do you think about cases like this, where justice takes decades to achieve? Do you believe the 10-year sentence was appropriate given the circumstances? Or should Larry have received a harsher punishment? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's have a respectful discussion based on the facts of the case. If you found this case as compelling as we did, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you real cases that challenge our understanding of justice, showcase the evolution of forensic science, and remind us of the importance of never giving up on truth. Join our community of viewers who believe that every victim deserves to be remembered and every case deserves to be told. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next investigation.